Hi, sir.
You get the black leather, but it's a little sweet. I was expecting it to be maybe spicy or something a little bit more aromatic. This one has more of a freshness to it. It's leathery but freshness as well. I'm not a big fan of those ones. They're okay. I smelled that one already. The dry down is like a creamy vanilla, like a musky vanilla. It's okay, but it doesn't blow me away. It reminds me a little bit of the Rebels that I just smelled, the John Barbados. It's like a little bit of like a brand new black leather, but like a freshness to it, like a manly cologne freshness. It doesn't smell unique or interesting, or it's nothing that I would want to wear. I'll check out the women's one. Very light, like a synthetic sweet floral. It's nothing great. It's like a boozy sweet cherry, but with the rose. The cherry's quite like a synthetic sweet cherry, but it's got a darkness to it. It's quite nice actually. Maybe a little too sweet, could be a bit cloying I think. It's quite nice. If you like cherry, I think it's worth checking out. It does smell more feminine though. I don't think a guy could pull that off. It's a very feminine kind of light, clean floral. almost like peony or something. It's quite nice, very inoffensive. The lavender is really nice in this. It's quite a crispy herbal lavender. Just a little bit of the citrus. I like that. It smells good. It doesn't smell too much of a barbershop fragrance, which is good. And I think probably unisex. This one is like very orangey, orange blossom, very clean. It's too much zesty orange for me. I'm not keen on that. This sounds interesting. The descriptions are very accurate. It does smell of sage and absinthe. It's quite herbal. It's quite nice. I think it's unisex. I think a man could wear that. Dirty trick. This is called, or described as iris accord with an ink note. It does smell like ink, and I don't like the iris notes. It's yeah, it's kind of like an, imagine lipstick dipped in ink. A bit strange. I think my favourite one was the lavender one, and then the liquid diamonds, and the sage was quite nice as well. It's a very sickly, cloying sweetness to it. It's very, I think it smells cheap to me. There's a slight dirtiness behind this very cloying sweetness, which I don't like. I don't think that smells very good.
Yeah, only actually we are planning for only 2 minutes you can finish. Yeah. Yeah, then it's more for the contouring. Yeah. And this is because this one, actually this is very good offer also for the discount, after discount $40 for free. No, that's okay. I'll just get the zero. No, just the...
Doesn't taste. I prefer that to the original one, but it's still not quite tasty. remember hearing reviews on that one being kind of weird and different and interesting or something. Doesn't smell remotely interesting to me. I don't even know how to describe it, just a slight sweetness. It's great. I like the original men's version, but it doesn't last very long. I've never smelled the women's one. Okay, it smells like synthetic iris. It reminds me of alpha ironone. Ironone alpha is a synthetic violet iris note. That's almost all I can smell. It's not a bad smell. It smells very cheap and synthetic. Kind of a violety iris synthetic smell. This has got the same kind of sickly sweetness that I keep smelling. Again, it's too sickly sweet. I don't know what the trend is with these very overly sickly sweet fragrances. They seem to be everywhere. It's almost like the same notes all the time. That's one of the poorer designer fragrances I've smelled. It makes you want to sneeze. Is that meant to smell like bubblegum? It reminds me of Hubba Bubba bubblegum, or like it's reminding me of something. Maybe it's not bubblegum. Like those bubblegum balls that you chew and you crack them and then it's like turns into chewing gum. It smells like candy. I was expecting like a green forest, but it smells quite sweet. I've sprayed the dry down along last time I was here, and it lasts forever on a strip. Like literally, I think it was like 2 weeks on a paper strip, a crazy long time. But it was like a creamy, musky vanilla, but very synthetic, like vanillin mixed with like galaxolide musk. It felt like a very common base. Quite a common base in designer perfumes is like vanillin, galaxolide, and like isoe super and hedione. Makes like a long-lasting, creamy, musky kind of base, and that's kind of what that smells like. So the dry down is a bit unremarkable, but yeah, it's okay. It doesn't smell bad, but it is quite synthetic. very strong iris note. It's quite a synthetic, dry iris. With a subtle spice. And almost a note of like a brown suede from a first impression. It's not my taste. Okay, the woman's one is quite woody. Almost like the cap looks like it's like a pale softwood, but there's just a little bit of a syrupy, sickly sweetness to it behind the woods. Not ones that I think much of. The oud mineral wasn't that mind-blowing. I was expecting it to be super salty and oudy, but it felt quite tame and actually not all that salty. I thought it was a little mild. It didn't blow my head off with like seaweed. I thought it was quite tame.
These two floral, jasmine and pepper rose.
This one reminded me a little bit of the Nasty sort of Rodriguez collection.
And this one musk. This is leather.
Like it's almost like a concretey musk.
Oriental.
I don't dislike it. It does remind me a little bit of elements of the Narciso Rodriguez, which I like, but it goes more into the territory of the the EDT, which is more the like the wet concretey vibe, which I wasn't keen on. It reminds me a little bit of that. They don't have the other new Tom Fords. I think the Oudwood Intense and all those, it's not there. Someone asked me to check out the Yves Saint Laurent private line, but I can't find them. I'm sure I've seen them here before, but I can't see them, so...
Rose faces with sandalwood and
I have no idea what the notes are for that, but it smells fresh, like almost like neroli. It's okay, but it's not my taste. I don't like that one at all. Not quite sure how to describe that one to you. It's a little bit more intense. Gives me a bit of a headache though. This one smells more like a barbershop fragrance. Like it smells like shaving foam. That's the first impression it gives me, is like a shaving foam. Yeah, I'm not a fan of any of those personally for my taste. Okay, we're going to test these out. It's called Oud and Rose. I smell a lot of oils by Risassi. These kind of Arabic. This smells very like an Arabic oil. Very potent, dark, strong, sweet rose, and kind of like a synthetic cheap oud. Very, very loud. So, not my taste.
Thank you anyway.
Royal amber is very sickly sweet, and again very dark and Arabic, kind of oil inspired. But there's this just sickly sweetness that I keep smelling in all these different fragrances. And I'm not sure actually what the note is that makes this kind of super sickly sweetness. I'm gonna have to try and find that out, what this note is I'm smelling everywhere. I actually smell this note in the women's fragrance, the one that's shaped like a purse bag. The green, I can't remember who it's by. It reminds me of that. It has that same kind of rubbery, super sickly kind of sweetness. It smells like 1,000,001 other designer men's fragrances. It's kind of light and nondescript. I don't know if my nose is getting confused now, but it reminds me a little bit of that Coach that I just smelled. All these designer fragrances smell the same. That's partly why I don't like a lot of them. They all use very similar. Basically, designer fragrances are made to a budget, so they use the same ingredients, the same cheap materials that are affordable for a mass market designer fragrance. So that's why a lot of them smell very similar and the same, because they're utilizing the same common notes. And then they also obviously pick ones that are popular with other brands, and then brands will copy, and then you'll get, familiarity of what they think will sell. So all these designer fragrances end up smelling alike, partly because they copy the trends, and partly because they're limited to the ingredients that they use, which is why I tend to fall in love with niche fragrances more. It's because they have a broader palette and of what they can afford to use in a fragrance for quality material.